Okay, well, hi everyone, and thank you very much for watching or listening. Liam Hartree here today with another episode of Presenting Champions for the Simply Inspired podcast. And I'm absolutely buzzing to announce that today I've got a very special guest who's a little different from my usual topics that we get into. But man, this man has lived 3, 4, 5 lifetimes in one. You can be the judge of that. First and foremost, today's guest, Lee Davis, 20 years in the military, including, and I've actually got a list here because you've achieved so many things. I don't always keep lists, but deployed on 4 operational tours, 2 in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Estonia. Discharged with a rare brain condition, which we'll be talking about later as well. He's an ultra marathon runner. He's been a skiing coach, a boxing coach. He's competed in multiple ultra marathons, and trust me, guys, when we find out more about that later on, it's going to blow your mind if it's something you haven't heard of before. He has so many things to tell, but as always, it's a lot deeper than just sports. As always, with my podcast, we're going to be getting into mindset. We're going to be getting into mental health. We're going to be getting into how anything is possible with the right belief, the right work ethic, and a lot more. So stay tuned. And champ, wow, thank you for coming on the show, and it's an absolute pleasure, mate. It really is.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks for having me, Liam.
So, okay, I mean, it's a quick intro. I've probably only scratched the surface there, as people will find out when they listen, and we'll go into it a little bit deeper. But like I said, condensing your life into an interview, it's like 3 or 4 lifetimes in one. So I think obviously starting with the military and everything. Sometimes I start with where people grew up and that type of thing. But I think in your case, it's something that made you the man you are today. So let's go back to the beginning of that and talk about your initial inspiration to join and when you first went into the military. Let's start there, please.
So, I was 16 and it was 2001, and it was literally, I was mixing with the wrong crowd. So as you do when you're a youngster, getting into all sorts of trouble, and being from the valleys, I grew up in a little village called Croesero. The path before me, or the path for me, was pretty much predetermined. If I'd stayed where I was, it was jail. I was always level-headed, and I always had a good head on myself, but I did fall into the wrong trap of, I never touched drugs, but I could see myself, and I looked at my peers and the boys that I used to, or my gang that I used to hang around with, and I could see jail, I could see fighting, I could see drugs. And when I was 16, I decided that I wasn't going to be another statistic, and I joined the military. As you do, I thought I was missing something back home. So actually, when I joined when I was 16, it was the day before the Twin Towers. So when I joined, it was like a baptism of fire. I didn't know what was going on. I was tiny. When I was 16, I was like 5'3". I found my army records because obviously I'd just been discharged. I was 5'3" and I was 47 kilos. So it was a complete new world to me, and I thought I was missing something back home. So I got out. I got out when I was 17, because back then, if you were under 18, you could just get out without doing 4 years. But lo and behold, I was in Civvy Street. I potted about for a bit. I worked away doing suspended ceilings and stuff like that in London and Manchester. But then I rejoined then when I was 19. And I joined, and I was like deployed straight to Iraq from basic training. So yeah, the catalyst for me to join the forces, Lee, was I looked at what was in front of me. Like everybody else back then, it was jail, drugs, or do you know what I mean? I know I was level-headed, and I probably would have stayed away from that anyway. But the options in the valleys, it was nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is the thing. I mean, in Wales now and in a lot of places, it is unfortunately still the same in a lot of ways, I would say,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a sad thing. And yeah, there's not a lot of options. There's not a lot of outlets for people putting energy in a constructive way. So it's a big decision, to make at such a young age as well. So, fair play to you as well.
Yeah.
So in terms of this, obviously you were in and you were back out and everything, but let's talk a little bit about how you adapted to the regime, because you said about a baptism by fire then, and it's something I find interesting because when I've had people who've done military service, some people slot right in and it fits like a glove. Some people, obviously, there's a bit of trial and error and everything. It does depend on the individual. So what was your process? I mean, I know with this, we'll sort of have to cover the first time you went in and when you went back in again, but did
Yeah.
you slot straight in with the guys and getting on with everybody in the routine, or was there a little bit of sort of adjustment for you in those early days?
Yeah. So I think with any new situation that people have come across, and you talk about, like, you see youngsters now with social anxiety and stuff like that. For me, when I went through basic training, I'm very self-driven, but I always had that in my back pocket of, if you leave, you're going back. And this isn't taking anything away from people that have gone down that route in the valleys, but if you leave, you were going to go back and your life is destined for a 9 to 5 job on minimum wage. So I always had that in my back pocket. And because I joined the infantry, you see walks, and 9 times out of 10, the boys that are in your situation come from broken families, want to escape where they come from. So you do tend to gel, but then you obviously do get the odd one or two. Just that's like in everyday life that are full of themselves and will make life hard for you. But as a general rule, basic training, we got through it by the section. It's a lot different now because I've been there as an instructor, but yeah, back in the day it was hard, fast, and aggressive.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's, brutally honest viewpoint of what's going on there. But again, I love what you're saying there about changing your trajectory in life. Your life was heading in this direction. You said, right, okay, I've got to steer that over here. It's a very valuable lesson for people listening to this as well, who are in that situation. So I'd like to get your advice on that topic real quick. If people are listening to this and their life is not going in the direction they want, or they know people, family, friends, whoever it is, someone whose life's heading on the wrong track in one way or another, whether it's the drugs and the jail, or whether it's just not living up to somebody's potential. I mean, you said about the whole, minimum wage, and again,
Yeah.
no disrespect to anybody, but if you feel your potential is more than that, so what can people do to change their direction in the way that you did, if there's anyone going through that now, if that makes sense?
Dare to be different.
Mm.
Dare to be different. Don't fall into the cattle that everybody else does. If you want to step outside and you want to do something, difference is the only way that you're going to achieve it. What happens when we're younger is we fall into a trap, and circumstances will have it is you are a reflection of your 5 best friends. And if your 5 best friends are going out pinching cars, robbing shops, you're going to stay in that path. Unless you dare to be different and choose a path for you, you will stay in that path. So my advice to anybody stuck in a trap, or anybody that's thinking about bettering their lives, the only way you're going to do it is by being different. And being different's fine. Like, I get it all the time because I run all the time, and like, you're only somebody will call you crazy until it works, and then you're a genius. So difference to me is the way that you'll stick out and the way that you will find your path. I was different to my mates. My mates wanted to stay there and do their thing. It was only by me having the balls to go, do you know what? I'm going to try something different, that took my life on a complete different path.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, it's a powerful message, and as you know from seeing some of my other stuff, it's the main reason why I do these. Is to pass those types of lessons along and just have a positive impact on people. I always say I love sports and everything, but if it was just talking about the sports, I would have packed this in ages ago. But it's in on the lessons. So thank you, and we'll be sharing some more life lessons as we go through this. But thank you for sharing that, mate. That's cool. So yeah, you mentioned about, obviously, you came out the army, you went back in and everything, and then you were straight into Iraq. I mean, that is a baptism by fire. So first tour, starting there, in your own words. Now, this is something that is this could go in any direction.
Yeah.
But I guess some of your memories, some of your highlights, some of the things that stick with you, good, bad, indifferent, for whatever reason, is going to be the best way to do it. Because as much as we can definitely go a bit in depth with this, and I want
Yeah.
we'd be here till next week if we talked about everything. So
Oh yeah, we
some of
would. Yeah.
your highlights, your personal highlights, would be great from the first tour, please.
So literally the first tour was Optetic 6, and the only way I can say it without being derogatory to anything that has happened is there was a lads' holiday. Like we were in a little base called Schreiber Log Base, and the lads called it Scheibitha. We played football, we drank milkshakes, we sunbathed, patrolled in soft hats. There was no threat really, and I know boys did lose their life later on, not in my regiment, but on one occasion. But from what I've been through later in my tours, this was just a complete respite. It was just a work, but you wouldn't think of it as an operational tour.
And when it comes to your expectations at that time of, going in, because obviously now you know so much more and you've been through so much more, but at that time when you first went in there, how did it match up to your expectations?
So you're being deployed to Iraq, you're shitting yourself. Like there's no two ways about it. You have to go. There's no way you can't, because then you'd be refusing to soldier and you'd be jailed. But on a daily, like when you're in the situation, on a daily, you are on edge. So you're hyper alert at all times, and you never switch off because of that situation you're in. You're in Iraq. But it's only looking back now that you realize that, do you know what, that was like so placid compared to the rest of the operational tours that I did.
Absolutely, yeah. It's fascinating in a way, because it's from the outside looking in, it's different from what you expect to hear as well. But obviously that did change, so this first time you were basically having fun and maybe learning some new skills and getting to know everybody in a new country. But then obviously when it comes to going back again, from what you've described to me, things really went up a notch, and that was when it got real. Now, I'm going to just say here as well. I mean, I know you're doing what you signed up for and everything, but going back again, some of the things you've done, and we barely started the story yet, but leaving the army, going back in, I mean, it takes brass balls, for want of a better term, to do what you've already been doing. Never mind what's going to come later. But yeah, the second tour, obviously, we'll go a bit more in depth into this one because things got real at this point. So in your own words, let's start, for anyone who doesn't know, on the distinction between the first one and the second one, because from what you've told me, there was quite a difference here,
Yeah. So on the first tour, I never fired a round in contact. On the second tour, I was a lot more experienced in the army. I'd promoted to Lance Corporal. So that meant I was in charge of like 4 men. And I was also a warrior gunner. So the warrior is like an armored fighting vehicle, and it carries 7 people in the back. Not quite a tank, but kind of. It's an armored fighting vehicle with a 30mm cannon. When we went back for the second time, it was the peak of the Iraq violence. So the tour ended up being the most violent period of 7 months throughout the whole of the Iraq war. So from my period of Operation Telic 10, so that obviously I'd gone to Telic 6 in 2005, in 2007 I deployed on Telic 10. In that space of time, more people were injured and killed than the whole of the Iraq war. So going from having milkshakes and sunbathing to getting shot at every day and blown up, it was a complete contrast.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, something to touch on here that I think is quite relevant is again the whole adaptation thing, because you're back in that situation. It's a sharp contrast from the first time, as you described, but I can sort of see that in your face as well, to be honest. Like you can really feel the vibe of this. So coming back the second time, adapting into that situation, I mean, I know you had more army experience. I know it's what you trained for, but I'm just going to put it out there like it is. I mean, from what you're saying, shit was getting real at this time, and it was getting heavy, and you were in the trenches. So what was going through your mind at that point when you realized the level that this was getting to, you know?
So I knew anyway. So before we deployed, you do a thing called like pre-deployment training, and obviously the news as well. And then you've got people that a regiment that you're taking over. You know the action is kicking off. So that's sort of worse. So when you've been in pre-deployment, you know, like if there's been casualties reported or reports of fatalities, you know you're going into that area and you're taking over that regiment. So not only is it the 7 months they deployed, 6 or 7 months they deployed in Iraq, it's the build up to it, and then saying goodbye to your families, knowing the situation you're going into. Yeah, and I suppose it's that hyper alertness, and that doesn't ever go away for some people when you leave the forces. That feeling of always being on edge, always looking over your shoulder. Where's the next contact coming from? What's he doing? And I think a lot of people suffered with that past tours. But yeah, it's that Telic 10, we knew before we were going that it was going to be punchy.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, well, as we get into this a little bit more, I always respect when people are doing interviews that there are some things that we're bound to touch on at some point that are not going to be super easy for you to talk about, you know, even though I know you're happy to put it out there. I'm just precursoring this because I do say that to people sometimes because in the nicest way, it's a brave thing to do, an interview, and to put very personal things out there. Do you know what I mean? And I'm just saying. So when it comes to some of the contacts and some of the action and everything, talk to us about maybe one or two things that stand out in your memory from what it's like in that situation, because quite frankly, obviously military people watching this will know, but for the rest of us, seeing something on the news, seeing something on TV is a million miles away from actually being there in that situation and how fast things happen and how it is. So are there maybe one or two moments you can share with us from what a contact is like from people who are not military based, if that makes it, basically in layman terms, basically, you
Yeah,
know?
so the only way I can put it to civvy terms is from the initial moment of contact. So let's say we were going out, and Iraq Telic 10 was heavily warrior led. So you're either in the turret in charge of the gun or you're in the back. So from the moment of contact, and usually at the start of the tour when we're getting contacted, the rounds, you can hear them hitting the truck. You're shitting yourself, but that goes away. Like generally the fear of contact disappears, and I'd say that happens in about 3 or 4 weeks. So 3 or 4 weeks of consistent getting shot at, that fear initial goes away. But what replaces it is from the moment of the initial contact, like I said again, I'll keep referring back to you, you're hyper alert, your adrenaline's pumping. And sometimes I was in contact for hours. And it was only when I got back to camp and I knew when we drove through those gates, all right, we were safe from contacts, we weren't safe from IEDs. So only when you drive back through camp that all the adrenaline just disappears and you think, what the fuck's just happened? And when the adrenaline disappears, that's when the thoughts kick in of, fuck me, that was close, or that's when everything kicks in. What could have happened? You don't think about it in a situation at all. Like, it's mad what they say when your training kicks in, but it does. Like, you're trained to act a certain way, do a certain thing, and you do that, and you're on hyper alertness, your adrenaline's pumping. It's only when the contact's finished and you know you're safe that it just disappears like that. And then that overwhelming sense of, fuck, I'm safe. And then you process what's just happened.
Yeah. And obviously, it's something that's talked about a lot with the whole PTSD thing and everything. And I mean, I'm not a big fan of labels because people's experiences are different and everything. But that concept of trauma and flashbacks and all this type of thing. And again, when I've had people on this show, I mean, a few weeks ago, I had a guy who was 3 tours Afghanistan in that case and everything. He was talking about PTSD, and people describe it differently, in different situations. But what has your personal process? I know this is a pretty big question, but what has your personal process been with coping with some of the things that you must have experienced out there, to be honest?
I'm not fortunate, but um, I haven't struggled in the way that other lads struggle when they've got PTSD. So PTSD, for those that don't know, is a reaction to stress, a high trauma. And it's not just soldiers that get PTSD. You can get PTSD in a car crash. You can get PTSD in a bad birth. So it's how people react to a stressful situation. And what happens is the brain's putting you into a state of as if you were in that situation, and you can't process it. I'm fortunate in a way that I haven't had that PTSD affect my day-to-day life. It has affected my sleep. So my sleep's been a massive drama, and I find myself sometimes waking up in a contact position as if I'm returning fire. So slumped over the bed, holding an imaginary weapon. Don't remember the dreams most of the time. When I do, it's usually the same kind of dream. I'm in a contact, and then I'll wake up in the same position. So for me, day-to-day life, I haven't really had that impact me. Yes, I'm jumpy. If a bang was to go off, but like that's partly the army's fault. They flew me back from Iraq on bonfire night. Like, yeah. So
Never.
they flew me back from Iraq on bonfire night. One rocket and I was under the car. My missus is like, "What the fuck are you doing?" But the sound of I was under the car. So yeah, I am jumpy, and I think everybody that's served in the military will be the same, PTSD or not. And I think that's from that hyper alertness. But yeah, I'm lucky that not. I say lucky, fortunate. I say all these words, but I know it could come at any point. Do you know what I mean? PTSD doesn't just. It isn't just a timeline thing. It could come years down the line where your brain goes, "Nope, I'm not having it." But yeah, it's a real, and I hadn't seen it firsthand, and there was a massive stigma about it like 10, 12 years ago, and we're still trying to fight that stigma. But until I seen it in my best mate, that I knew it was an actual thing. So yeah, it's not a nice thing to experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's an important thing you touched on there as well about how the stigma is breaking down in terms of mental health, in the sense that people can speak about it and people can put it out there, and it's not that judgment. I mean, in some ways, it's gone the other way, and people speak about it all the time, and it's almost trendy for some people. But it's really good that those barriers are broken down, even in not that many years, as you say, 10 years or whatever. There's a lot more work to do, mind. So obviously, but it is breaking down. Um, Friends of yours and mates of yours who've been affected is something I want to touch on as well, because even though with this we've been honing in on you,
Yeah.
obviously with military service, there's other people that you may want to mention. I mean, I'll leave this open to you. Anything from people you've lost through to people who are still struggling now with the after effects and the aftermath of all this type of thing. Again, quite a broad question. I don't mind where we go with that, but what have you seen in terms of some of the effects of mates and people you served with are having?
So what I will say is I've lost quite a few friends, and one of my closest friends to PTSD. Again, he couldn't process what had happened on tour, and two punchy tours, Iraq and Afghanistan. So I know the effect that PTSD has, and I know now there's boys going to be watching this that have got PTSD, that are my mates that I've served, and it's so easy to lose contact. Like I've been out of the regiment now 2 years, and it's so easy to lose contact. And I think the biggest thing for me for PTSD is that lack of contact, is that lack of checking in. And it's usually, and I'm not putting anybody into a pot here, but generally, if people have got PTSD, they're suffering in silence. So my urge would be, have the courage just to pick up and drop a text. Drop a text to me, to any of your mates, because we're there. Like, PTSD is real. And I'd rather listen to you crying than carry you at your funeral, do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. It's a powerful message. People need to speak out. That's what needs to be done. And yeah, people do suffer in silence, generally, I think men especially, but people
Yeah.
in general, don't I think it's a weakness. We think it's a weakness to speak out as men and everything, and it's not. So yeah, putting it out there, someone you trust. Glad we get to get that message in here.
Yeah.
It's a very important thing in my mind. Um, yeah, and okay, so like I said earlier, by the way, I respect that by the way, it's not easy to speak about. No, I mean, I know you want to speak about it to get the message, but I am sorry for your losses because
Yeah.
it's a rough thing to deal with, for
It's
you.
it's
And
it's not going to be the end of it, Liam. Do you know what I mean? Like, it won't be the end of it. As sad as it is to say, like, I don't think we're even 60% close to fixing PTSD.
no, this is the thing. I mean, the awareness helps and everything, but there's a lot more to do. I know, like I was saying,
Yeah,
a lot more.
yeah, it is.
So yeah. So obviously touching on this, we've been talking about Iraq and everything, but you had other tours as well, which is pretty wild and considering everything you've been through on what's happened already. But you've also got Afghanistan, you've got Estonia as well, you mentioned to me. So same type of thing, your highlights. I don't know if saying that they're highlights is the right word, but
Yeah,
it's just the word I use because some of these things are terrible. Some of these things are
yeah,
what you said about the first tour, there was a lot of fun there. So there's a mix of experiences, but it's just my term for it is, the things that stick out in your memory now. And again, I'm sure we're only scratching the surface with this one as well. Let's start with the build up with Afghanistan. I know also we're moving around in time here a little bit as well. So obviously,
yeah. So,
give people
so we're
that.
only jumping forward 2 years anyway.
Yeah,
Um, Afghan was a lot different because we knew we'd be, whereas Iraq was heavily warrior based, where we were in Musakala and Helmand province, warriors were restricted to basically one or two routes. So we knew we were going to be light rolf on feet. Add to that the fact that most of the people now that were in Iraq had left. So we had a lot of new soldiers that had to go through the process of training, and this was their first tour. Um, Afghan, for me, probably not the highlights, but the things that I take away from Afghan is just the boys. Like, whenever we were in a shit, boys would dig out blind to make sure that we were all safe, that we were all back in camp that night, having a laugh and joke about it. And it got to the stage, this is going to sound sadistic, it got to the stage that if we went out on patrol, we had certain areas. If we went out on patrol and we were going to a certain area, we knew we wouldn't get contacted. And that would piss us off because we craved that hit of adrenaline of getting contacted. Because then when we come back, we'd all be on such a high, if nothing had gone wrong, that we sort of chased that. And I think a lot of people chased it afterwards when we finished the tour. A lot of boys tried pushing out for more tours with different regiments. So I think, yeah, the biggest thing that I take away from Afghan is the boys. Like, I would give my left arm and left leg if any of the boys that I was in Afghan with were struggling, because without them, yeah, it was it was a different war. It was a different war. We were fighting a different enemy. But yeah, apart from that, it's so in Iraq I pretty much saw the Al Qaeda or the Jam pretty much every day. Afghan, although most patrols we went out on, I was shot at. I saw the Taliban twice in 7 months. So you can see the difference there. So we were fighting a different battle. It was more, in Afghan, you were more on edge, more alert. But in Iraq, you knew they had no problem popping up, and you could see them. In Afghan, I saw them twice in 7 months.
Yeah, that is a different type of warfare altogether, isn't it? Really, you
Yeah.
know? That's fascinating. I've got to be honest. Now we've touched on obviously a few different things here, but there's a couple of other aspects of the army life I'd like to touch on. And one of them is what you just said there about the brotherhood, or you know, that close bond, because obviously looking at it from a civilian perspective is a different thing, but when you see that even physically with, you know, mates who've been together in the army and they're back on Civvy Street now, the bond is unique, I would say. But obviously, you know, you've experienced that firsthand. So what are your thoughts on, for want of a better term, what that actually means, or how you would describe that? Because again, people who've served, they'll know all about this. But for people who haven't, I think it's quite a special thing, and it bears mentioning. Personally, I think, you know.
Yeah, that's a tough question, in the fact that it's going to be hard to portray an answer in and do it justice. But the only way I can put it across is, like, for all the boys that have served, I could not see them for 3 years and speak to them like it was yesterday. And I think it's the fact that we've got common ground, and the fact that I know he knows, I know he knows, if you know what I mean. So we know we've been in the shit and we've had to dig out blind. And I know that you know that I know that. So silently, we don't have to say anything. We know. And I think that is, from my perspective, how that brotherhood is so strong. Because we've got that common ground. And without saying anything, we know that we've been in the shit and we've pulled ourselves through together. So I think, I think that for me is how the brotherhood is different than everybody else you'll ever see.
Absolutely, yeah. It is a hard thing to do it justice. I can understand that. And even when I'm asking questions, I think sometimes I just think, well, you know what, I'm not going to do this justice, because
Yeah,
these experiences, and you have to accept that, you know. I mean, it's one of these things where we can just give it our best shot, you know, and words can only convey
yeah,
so much, can't they? You know, at the end of the day, and it is limited. Another thing to touch on though is obviously the flip side of this, and I don't know how this applies to you or not, but what I mean by that is there's one thing dealing with the trauma of losing mates and everything, to be honest, you know, physically there or afterwards from the after effects as you touched on. And there's another thing to deal with, obviously taking life, you know, killing people basically, you know. And again, I'm not sure how that aspect applies to you. I've talked about this with a number of people, including shout out to Greg Harrison, who was on my show, Sniper with 80 confirmed kills, you know, the longest kill and all that. And he talked about this mostly from the PTSD aspect more than the details. But in your words for yourself, for people you served with, coming to terms with what you have to do. Obviously, you signed up, you're protecting your country and everything like that. And this is something, by the way, as soon as we just talked about it, I'm not going to be able to do this justice even by asking the question.
yeah,
You get where I'm coming from with
yeah, yeah, of course.
that process. And I mean, particularly that process coming back into civilian life and everything, because obviously you've lived in a way that a lot of people couldn't really get their head around, to be honest. So I'd imagine there's almost is there almost a barrier there at
Yeah,
times?
yeah. So, like, it sounds quite bizarre and far-fetched. So, like, 1 minute I'm fighting a left flank attack on 3 Taliban, launching shoulder grenades, all this. Next thing, I'm on a plane to the UK and I'm bumping into people in Asda with shopping trolleys. So it's quite, when you think about it like that, I think from the outside looking in, it's quite a bizarre thing to try and process. But internally, as a person, I think you just move from one situation to the next, and without PTSD aside, somebody without PTSD, I think you just function in a normal way where the processes of Afghan, Iraq, in contact, getting shot at, shooting back, confirming kills, doesn't really enter your day-to-day living. Like, Afghan's Afghan, shopping in Asda with my wife and daughter, shopping in Asda with my wife and daughter. And that is the process whereby, and I'm not a PTSD expert, I'm not a doctor, but in my mind is what causes PTSD, where they can't separate the two. But for somebody without PTSD, the process is the process. Afghan is Afghan. That's what you've done there. You were a soldier. That was your job. Back home, I'm running, I'm working, I'm fixing boilers. I don't think about why, how often, what the effects are. Because I think if you really sit there and actually critique every single thing, every single contact, you drive yourself fucking stir crazy. So yeah, I completely bang, that's Afghan. This is my life. I can talk to you about Afghan, no fucking problem. I can talk to you about Iraq, no problem. But I won't let that interfere where I'm going in life. I won't let the two processes cross.
Yeah, it makes total sense. It does make absolute sense, and compartmentalizing it and everything is healthy. You know, something people should be doing.
Yeah, not that I hide it, because I'll openly talk about it. I don't hide the fact that I've been to Afghan or Iraq. I won't. I'll never hide the fact. But I don't let it interfere my thought process. And I think where people and my mates have struggled in the past is it always entered their thought process. The fact that we lost men, the fact that they were in contact, the fact that they got blown up, the fact that they got shot at, they let that, or the brain wasn't functioning properly, and that was what was happening. But for me and for boys that haven't suffered with PTSD, they're two different worlds, and they don't combine. We can talk about them, but they never ever interact with each other. Afghan will never, unless I'm sleeping and then I wake up in a fucking fire position. But in my day-to-day life, no, I separate the both.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, you know, fair play to you, because it takes a lot of mental strength, I would say, to do some of that as well. But
Well, it don't. This is the thing. It don't. Like, for me, it's a natural process. So I'm not going out of my way, and I'm not a brain expert, but I'm not going out of my way to block that out. So where I've heard people say, "Oh yeah, I put it in a box and then I lock it away." I don't know how I would do that in regards to the brain. I think for me, it's just a natural process. I never ever combine the two, and I don't hide away from it either. So I don't really lock it away. So I don't know how to, because I'm not an expert in psychology or anything like that. But yeah,
I get where you're coming from, though. I totally, and as well as that, you know, we'll move on from this in a moment. But as well as that, I have heard that process before, and I mentioned Craig just now with that interview, and you can hear this in the interview. But he talks about this, about how it was again not blocked out, not repressed, it
yeah,
was just in a separate part of his mind, and then he just
yeah,
the PTSD shattered that, and he said it was like breaking a wall of glass.
yeah, yeah,
And it obviously then it came through, but until that time, it was totally two different worlds. So I get where you're coming from, and
yeah.
it's actually a valuable lesson as well. So we'll touch on Estonia, and then we'll need to get into the actual running. You
There's
know,
nothing to talk about, Estonia. It was a operation where we were there to defend or to deter Putin from pushing over the border and taking Estonia. But there was never. This was 2017. There was never a real threat. We were given blank rounds, and most of the time was done training for an effect that could happen. So we were there as a deterrent, so it wasn't really at all. So we can move on from that.
Fair enough. Simple as that. Well, I think obviously we'll touch on the running and we'll go into that. But before we do, obviously talking about the reasons for your actual discharge as well, and the whole brain condition thing and everything. It seems we're talking about the brain just now. Obviously, I mentioned that in the intro, and I've read what you sent me, but I personally don't know much about this. So, you're telling the audience.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the circumstances around your discharge
Yeah.
and brain
So
condition.
I'll keep it as short as possible because I know I like to waffle. But essentially, when I was 18, I had dysfunction in my face, where my face was bigger on one side than the other. So I had surgery to correct that. In Iraq, in 2005, I banged my face and ended up getting CASEVAC'd to Headley Court in Birmingham for more reconstructive surgery. That was 2005, and then I put off any surgery for my career. So started focusing on my career, and then in 2014 I had my last surgery, which cut the nerve in my left hand side of my face. So this side is permanently dead. So when you go to a dentist and have your tooth out and have anaesthetic, that's what my face is like, permanent. So there. And I was told that numbness would, if it didn't come back in 2 years, it's there forever. So it'd been 5 or 6 years. Back end of 2020, I started getting like electric shocks from where the numbness finished up through my eye into my brain. And these electric shocks were exactly like an electric shock, as if you'd put yourself into a 240 volt. And I'm still serving at the time in the military, and I can't pinpoint what this is. So I try phoning my specialist up in Swansea, who's since retired, because for me the attacks are starting from where the numbness finishes. So I put 2 and 2 together, and I think, oh, perhaps it's the nerve endings trying to come back, trying to fix themselves. So I bear with it. The attacks get worse, but these attacks are bringing me to my knees in tears. So I go to the doctors and I say, look, I can't take this pain anymore. I don't know what's going on. I need to be seen. I've tried contacting my specialist, my surgeon in Swansea. He's retired. I need to see somebody. Well, they were putting through the processes of me seeing a specialist neurologist in London, and I just couldn't take it. I couldn't take the pain. I couldn't take the attacks. I was having like 20 or 30 attacks a day. So I ended up going to the doctors and saying, look, I can't even concentrate. I've got so much responsibility on me. I'm running ranges, promotion courses, development courses, because I was in the training wing, and I was having these attacks, and I was like, I can't fucking think straight. I can't think straight, and somebody can die. Like if I plan a range wrong, somebody could die, and I'm in shit. So I goes to the doctor. I said, I can't do this. So she sends me home end of January. February the 16th, I see a specialist in London, and I get diagnosed with what's called trigeminal neuralgia, and they call it a suicide disease. 26% of people kill themselves because they can't handle the pain. Now, it's common in 50, 60-year-old women, whereby the brain sends wrong signals to the nerves, and it shoots electric shocks up through your face. 2 years in SIU, where I spend 4, 5, 6 months in bed, unable to move, testing different medications. The fact of me doing that, not running, the fact of me losing my career, I end up in therapy. I go through therapy. I think it's a bit wishy-washy, grounding and to the trees and stuff. But what I do find from therapy is that it reframed my whole mindset around pain. And it's quite mad, because seeing a pain specialist as well, I've used my pain now. So whereas you could bang your toe or stand on Lego, I've used my pain for progression rather than keeping me back. So for all those months that I stayed in bed and I couldn't do anything, I could have been if I just thought about the pain different. And whilst the pain is still there, I still get the attacks. I learned to deal with the pain differently. 2 years went past, loads of different medications. Medication wasn't working. It worked for a bit. I then got diagnosed with a different thing called SUNA, short-lasting unilateral neurological attacks, basically cluster headaches or suicide headaches. Put me on a different medication. They don't stop the attacks, they just dim them down. But because of my 2 years of learning to deal with the pain, dumbed down pain is fucking still a damn sight better than actual full-blown attacks. So now, along with medication for the rest of my life, I can keep these pain levels down low and still operate. And my mission since I get discharged from the military. My mission has always been, like, no matter what situation you're in, I was in bed for months because I couldn't fucking move. I couldn't do any running. And for everybody who knows me when we talk about running, running's my life. To go to where I am now, I just want to show people that if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. And that's not me quoting some fucking motivational Instagram reel. That's me actually going out there and proving it to you by fucking winning ultra marathons and fucking winning 10 of them. It's me actually showing you, look, I've got a brain condition. I get attacked every single day. But if you change the way that you reframe the way you think, your life will fucking change. And that's my whole mission now.
Wow, that's powerful, man. I mean, I'm not lost for words very often.
Yeah.
To be honest, anyone who knows me will know I'm not lost for words very often. But in this case, I was just taking that in because it's absolutely amazing. The whole mindset thing is super powerful. I mean, I'm not going to go off topic into that, but there's so much in mind that we're capable of so much more than what we think and everything. So, okay, so you still get these every single day. And when an attack comes, what do you do in that moment now?
Now,
Yeah,
so in Lively, we put on 1,000 different masks, yeah?
yeah,
Yeah. So we put on a mask for our wives, for our mates, for the job, and when you're on your own, yeah. So you wear loads of different masks. So all I do now is I'm a fucking good mask wearer. Genuinely. Like, my attacks, I still have like 10, 15, 20 attacks a day. 9 times out of 10, you will never know. Because
wow.
I'm fighting it. When it's a bad one, I will have to take myself away and my face will like swell and my grimace. But those bad ones come every couple of weeks. So yeah, it's all about wearing mask, and we all do it. Everybody does it. Like, you will meet a different version of somebody on any given different day. And it's all about, I suppose, not lying to myself, but like, I've got to get on with life. Like, I can't. 2 years ago, 2021, when I was in bed, I was having the same attacks, same condition, but I didn't get out of bed for fucking months. Now look at me, running ultra marathons, working full time, like, and I'm still having the same attacks. So all I've done is just change the way I look at things. And that's like, it sounds like a fallacy and sounds so fucking far-fetched and cloud nine, but like, generally, by changing the way I think, I've changed my life.
Absolutely. Well, this is the thing that people need to understand is the mind is in this context, it's creating our reality, because even though things are happening to us, there's obviously the story we tell ourselves about it and everything and the way we feel about it and all these things. Not to go off topic, but I've done a lot of work with this in my own life, and
Yeah.
really is a disconnect between what's actually happening, what we think about what's happening, and they're two different things, and you can go into that in a whole different thing.
Oh yeah, we talk about it for
Quite,
hours.
quite wild, because when you get that, you can restructure things, that we believe about ourselves, things we believe about other people, whatever. And when you actually look at it in a cold light of day, oftentimes there's quite a disconnect between that's the truth, like the rock solid thing, and that's how we think of it, and it's different things. So Wow. Okay. And just to touch on it as well, because that's obviously the outside. Okay, you're a good mask wearer and everything. Cool. And I totally hear you on that because we all do it. But obviously on the inside, it's still hurting you. So how are you staying positive? Because I know I get the reframing thing, don't get me wrong, but just the fact that obviously at one point in time you were in bed, that you were like on your knees with this, saying about the whole suicide thing and like, do I give up on my life because I'm in pain or do I carry on? Specifically making that decision, that you have to get on with it. I think that will be valuable for people to know in the sense of how you don't let it get to, well, I'm sure it
Yeah, and
get to
I
you, but
think I think it's what I said just then, though. It's like, and you just said there, right? It's we can either focus on the positive or we can focus on the negative. And like at the end of the day, we've got two choices. We stay in bed in the morning or we get up. And it's that simple. It's, do I look at the negative of it and yes, I'm in pain, or do I look at the positives of it? I can still run. I got a beautiful family, a lovely home. I can still get up and go to work. Things to be thankful for. Yes, I've got a brain condition. Yes, it's going to get worse. Yes, I have to take medication for the rest of my life. But do I need to look at those things when I've got these positive things to focus on? No.
yeah, it makes sense. I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? The whole glass half empty, half full. Which one is it? Whatever. Well, obviously, the truth is, it's both, isn't it? It's just which one you choose to look at. I mean, it is
Yeah, it is.
empty
Yeah.
and it is half full as well. I mean, if you're looking at the glass, they're both there, but it's just
Yeah.
which one you focus on. So, I love that. I love the mindset stuff because it's something I've really come across, and especially with athletes as well. That sports is obviously a physical thing, but there's so much of it that's mental as well, and there's so much about
Yeah.
mental edge. Things I've been through in my own life, which I won't get into here, but I'll tell you another time. There's reasons why
Yeah.
I'm interested in that level of mental discipline. But let's talk about running because obviously running
Yes, let's do it.
is your life. Now, the thing is, we're coming up running obviously later in the interview, but I had to start with the military because it's such
Yeah.
a thing. It's made you who you are today. Something to be very proud of, serving obviously. But running is your life. So first of all, before we get into ultra marathons and how you got into ultra marathons, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, explain to us how long an ultra marathon actually is for anyone who
So this this
doesn't
this
know.
could cause controversy, but ultramarathon generally is anything over marathon distance, and the only race you're going to get over marathon distance as a start is 50 kilometers, so 31 miles. So for those of you that run marathons, it's 26.2 miles, but then an ultramarathon can be anything from 50k, which is 30 miles, right up to 200, 300 miles.
Wow. And that was what I said to you at the beginning. Before we started recording, I started researching this and I thought, man, okay, this is something, we need to find out more about. Now, let's start at the beginning with running. Was it something that you always did, while you were in the army or everything like that? Or was it something that came a little bit later? Let's get the timeline first and foremost.
Yeah, so I wasn't particularly fit when I first joined, in regards to where I got to. Um, but I always had a keen interest. I played football when I was younger, but I always had a keen interest in fitness. But then the more I looked into fitness, the better I got at it. So I ended up doing my PTI course in 2007. And that's like army physical training instructor. So you're basically running PT lessons for the lads. Um, and I didn't really. I'd run when I was younger for Bridgend cross country, and that was through my a relative. But I'd never been competitive. So I suppose fitness for me and running was through opportunity, really, in the military that I fell into running. I wasn't really competitive before when I was younger, but it was, yeah, through a chance opportunity.
Yes, that's how it started. Okay. Now, the other thing that I think is going to be interesting for people with this, when I speak to athletes, it doesn't matter what sport it is, there's usually a process that they go through, right? Of realizing, okay, I enjoy this. and I'm good at this, right, being the first step, and they're not always good at it straight off the bat. Sometimes it takes a bit of practice, obviously, but there's still that process of, okay, I do enjoy something about it to keep going. But then there's a shift of like, okay, actually, I can go far with this and I can do some big things, you know what I mean? You often find that. So when it comes to running like these insane distances, I can imagine for you, it didn't start off thinking you were going to do that. So when you did start off, what were your initial sort of aims, or what kept you in the groove of doing it in the very beginning?
So as human beings, we're innate in the fact that we like to find something achievable, right? And if it challenges us, then that competitive edge inside you will not want to quit until you've conquered it, and then you can move on to something else, right? Now, when I started ultramarathon running, I was dog shit. Like my first ultramarathon was the Ultimate Human Race, and it's the biggest ultramarathon in the world. People die running it. It's over the Drakensberg Mountains in South Africa, 56 miles. And I done it, and I've got this distinct memory. I don't have any clue about running. I've got this distinct memory of two 40-something ladies on the more larger side at 42 mile running past me and going, "Are you okay, love?" I was like, "Yeah." She said, "Jesus, you're young." I was like, "Yeah, I know." She said, "How old are you?" I said, "Oh, I'm 24. She's like, "You're way too young to be doing this." And off they trot. And I'm in a world of hurt. I've still got 14, 15 miles to go. I'm questioning my life choices. I'm like, how is this happening? But that is an instant fire lit in my belly where, how can I get good at this? Because at the moment, out of 13,000 people, I'm 10,000th. How can I don't like being not good at something. And innately, we strive to be better. So I think that's how everybody in fitness starts. I was terrible for the first, like, genuine 2009 was my first one. 10 years, I was shit. Like, a lot of people go quicker, but I just couldn't find the path to competing rather than completing. But
Wow.
yeah, it's that drive to be better, I suppose.
Now, I love something else you've touched on there that I think is really powerful, because a lot of these things are great for life. They're not just great for sports. It's something you can apply to life. What I mean by that is the process you went through of, not being good and then getting better, or in your own words, being shit and then getting better, is powerful, because I think I have a personal opinion in this day and age. We live in a microwave world. We live in a world where people expect instant results with everything, and not just with fitness, but with a lot of things. And if people don't get those instant results,
They quit.
yeah, exactly. So I think as a life lesson, you're in a prime position to share how you didn't quit. Now, obviously, we've sort of touched on this because you haven't quit with the neuralgia, you haven't quit with the arm, you haven't quit with anything else. So you're obviously not going to quit with this. But nonetheless, when you're in that position and people who are older than you and bigger than you and all this type of stuff are running past you, and you're thinking, what's going on? And what I mean, I can imagine there'd be a whirlwind of emotions in that situation. But obviously, you kept going back to do it again. You kept pushing, and now you're where you are. So that process, in simple words, or in simple terms, is going to come down to simple choices. But those choices for you, let's go into that just a little bit deeper, because I think it's
So
value
I
to.
think right that whenever you start a journey of development, the initial phase is pride. So for me, when I was started ultra running, I could never quit because I was too proud of, and this is where I've changed now, gone years down the line, that back then I cared what people thought of, oh, Lee's meant to be fit, but what happens if I DNF or I pull out or I don't complete? All these things enter your mind, and it's toxic, absolutely toxic. And I've learned this down the line now, that your progression is not compared. Like, it doesn't matter by other people's thoughts of you. But back then, it's pride, it's massive pride. So that was the only reason in my early days of not quitting and wanting to. And now, having developed as a person, as a human being, as a runner, I want to better myself. I don't care what anybody else thinks about me. And I'll go against the curve with my training modules. Can I get better than my last time? Yes. How do I do it? I don't care about fucking what Joe Blogg says or what Timmy ran or what Tommy thinks I'm going to run. It's me versus me. Back then, everything was outside factors. He's going to think this of me. She's going to think that of me. They're expecting this of me. If I don't, then I'm going to be not as good or down here. So not only developing as a runner, but as a person. And I think that happens through life as well, through age.
Absolutely, it does. But it's like I said, it's a valuable lesson for life because it's a theme that I've seen with interviewing people at the highest levels, basically. It's a theme that I've seen with people who are in the Olympics, people who've won multiple world titles, people who've done all these things, where the people who've reached the highest levels or achieved the most things, in a funny type of way, they do the same type of process on two counts, where the you versus you thing, 110%, and not caring about the results from outside the results, like, I'm going to get this trophy or I'm going to get this medal or I'm aiming for that. But no, I'm just going to be better than I was yesterday. And then obviously you add that up over days, weeks, months, whatever, and it's exponential, So it's a very, very powerful lesson. I'm just highlighting it for life, because whatever people want to do in life, even if it's nothing to do with sports, that lesson applies, and it's just really worth really worth highlighting. So, okay, now obviously some of your proudest moments as an ultramarathon runner, I think, is a good one to get into. And I ask it this way because I'm sure there's a lot of stories, but I'd like to touch on basically some of the races out of all of them that mean the most to you when you look back on them now. And I know obviously it's a journey of continuing improvement. So the best is probably yet to come. I mean, I'd say it's definitely yet to come because you're improving every time and everything's so cool. But of the races you have completed or whatever, which ones are your favorites, simply put?
So my most memorable and will stick with me forever was last year. I ran from Porthcawl to Penarth, 42 miles. And the backstory is my mission to show to people that by changing your mind, you can change your life. I didn't just want to be that person that said it. I wanted to show it. So whilst I spent the year before in bed, in wallow and self-pity and woe betide me, losing my career in therapy, I wanted to show it. So I made it my mission to prove to myself that I was fucking capable, that I still had plenty left to give, and I had changed my mindset. So I set myself a target of going and winning and setting this course record. Now, winning and setting the course record is irrelevant in regards to if you were starting running. Like, don't look to win. But for me, this wasn't only winning the race, it was winning the battle of life, because I'd lost my career in the military after 20 years. I'd got a condition that was going to change my life forever, that was only going to get worse. So for me, winning this race, when I crossed that line, the elation of crossing that line, the fact that I proved to myself and could now say to others and show others, if I've done it and I've been in this situation, then you can too. So yeah, that's the biggest moment for me, is winning that race last year. But probably my favorite race for scenery is Costa Brava Extreme Running. So I run from Spain to France in 3 days along the coast, and that was just epic. I want to go out and do it again. I think the company's closed down, but I think another company's taken over. But yeah, very rarely do I do a race twice, but I would go and do that one again because it was just epic.
Wow, that is exceptional. I mean, It sounds superhuman, really, when you're describing this. But at the same time, you show the level people can get to. Like you were saying, not just with running, but with anything. It's the principle. It's not the specific, race. It's the principle of what you were just saying about, overcoming the pain, winning at life. Everything you just highlighted there. There is a pain factor to running. I mean, I've obviously run nowhere near as far as you, but I do like running as well. And obviously, there's pain barriers and things. So, in terms of like having a steely will that's the only way I can think of to describe it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
got a massive willpower element. Um, let's just touch on that in terms of like as you're racing. What are you actually thinking about in the moment, as the miles are counting down and as it's all happening and everything?
Shit loads. There's loads that goes through your mind. Like when I'm on a training run, that's where I'll come up with the most craziest ideas and sort out like everything junk in the house, or that's all sorted on the run. But when you're racing, I'm just purely focusing on the next kilometer and worrying about my nutrition, my drinking, my foot placement, and then also just being in the moment and taking in the views and just reminding myself of how lucky I am to be in this place. Do you know what I mean? So, like, say the coastal runs, just being in that moment and really taking away like the pain. You're gonna hurt. If you're gonna run an ultra marathon, it's gonna fucking hurt. There's no two ways about it. You are gonna be in pain. However, that pain ebbs and flows. So if you have an understanding that when you run an ultra, you're gonna hurt, you're gonna be in pain, but it'll come in waves, and you can just ride it. Because when you're feeling good, the pain's fucking gone. You don't even think about it. When it comes back, you just got to fight through. And I usually go quiet, and my mind just goes blank. And sometimes I'll shout to myself, or I'll G myself up. But most of the time, I just go dead silent and fight through that pain because I know the wave is coming.
That is again, that's a powerful lesson for life. And it's something again that I can see reaches into different areas of your life, like with the brain condition and everything. You've got practice of pushing through the pain, but at the same time that has levels to it. So it's good to touch on that as well. Wow, okay. And when it comes to like races that you would regard as being like your toughest challenges so far, out of a sport that is inherently tough, obviously, like we're just talking about, and it sort of goes with the territory. Are there some that stand out as being, where you had to dig deeper than others during your process of getting good at this? And if so, which ones were those? If there's too many to mention, but
Yeah, there's obviously loads. Brecon comes to mind because you fight in the weather, you fight in the elements, you fight in the terrain. The Brecon 50 mile, that was tough. But probably most recently was 2 weeks ago. I run a 30 miler with nearly 15,000 feet elevation up to the source of the River Severn. And because of lack of fitness, because of an injury that I was suffering with my hamstring, I wasn't in the best shape. And when I'm in a position and I'm racing, I'd gone out in the lead, but then because of my fitness, I'd dropped back on my hamstring. I ended up convincing myself that I'd settled for eighth place, and I didn't. As long as I kept top 10 in my mind. So this is the battles you go through. You fight in positions. You're like, right, okay, as long as I keep top 10, I'll be happy with that. I put in a good effort. But then I'd convinced myself that I was okay with eighth position, and then with about 5K to go, um, in my mind, I'm like, Lee, why are you being so fucking soft? Like, you're not giving everything. You are taking the easy option. And I have these conversations with myself. Like, genuinely, I'll tell myself that you are being weak. Like, you're taking the easy option. You could be fucking running here, and you could catch those. And once I clicked that I was taking the easy option, my mind went, no, you're fucking not. And off I went. And I overtook 4 people and came third in the last 5K. So I think that for me was a key factor of, and you can relate this to life. Like, if you catch yourself in a moment where you know you're being lazy, you can pull yourself out of that. Like, if you recognize you're being lazy, you have the ability to change it. It's just like setting your alarm, yeah? So when you wake up in the morning and you fucking hear the alarm, you have that choice of smashing snooze. If you smash snooze, that is you being lazy. You have the choice to get up out of bed and put your feet on the floor. Same as life. You can relate it to anything. And that portrayed massively in my last race 2 weeks ago, where I'd fucking snoozed that alarm. I was settling for 8. And then I'd click and gone, no, you fucking get going. So yeah, I think that's probably the most recent that I've been challenged.
Absolutely, yeah. And it highlights another key point there as well of what you say when you talk to yourself in your own head, or not just you, but anybody, is very, very important as well. And it's something personally, two things I use in my own life, but also two things I've come across over and over and over again with these interviews is visualizing and self-affirmations. And then the two things, I mean, there's more things than that, but they're the two main things I've seen that actually, really, really work. And visualizing a good outcome, I've definitely used it. My own life, it works. I've definitely seen a lot of people use it. It works. But what you say when you talk to yourself in your own head has got to be something useful. And when you sort of step back and listen to your own dialogue with yourself, it can be surprising, can't it? What comes out, what you need to correct.
A lot of people haven't found the ability to do that yet, though, Liam. Like I don't think like a lot of people are aware that the way you speak to yourself is how your life will fall out. Like if you're speaking to yourself like shit and you're constantly down on yourself, there's only one fucking way you're going. That's down.
Yeah.
Generally. But if you see yourself in a positive light, you talk positive, you think positive, where do you think you're going? And to quote again, another motivational quote, if you stand outside the barber's long enough, fucking in time you can have your haircut. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So if you keep talking positive to yourself all the time, in a fucking certain amount of time, you're going to be positive.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's powerful. And like, once again, I know I keep saying that, but there's a lot of things you're saying that I'm just highlighting them because for any aspect of life, wow, okay. So let's talk a little bit about the training as well, because obviously it's one thing talking about the races, but the races are obviously the result of the daily grind and the daily regime. So, I mean, this is the thing about sports is what people do, the bit that people see is obviously that's the tip of the iceberg, and what you're doing every day is what adds up. So, in terms of like your daily routine and, how it works, day to day, I mean, let's just start there with any aspect of it from obviously nutrition, we got hydration, we got how far you run per day, we got how you protect your feet. I mean, there's loads of things I don't personally even know that would be fascinating to get into. So take that away, whatever you want, basically.
Yeah. So again, without delving into it, it starts with a mindset. Yeah. So when I'm set on a training plan, I know that I've got an end goal, and if I lapse in that training, this end goal is going to suffer. Yeah. So it starts with mentality. Sometimes I'll look at my trainers for half hour. I'll be sat on the sofa, I look at my trainers for half hour. But that's only if I've had a bad day with attacks. Now, the way you've got to look at things is it has to become habit. So for something to become a habit, it has to be repeated. Repetition is the key. So if I was to go for a run in the morning or get up and go to the gym in the morning, like I'm away at the moment, I'm in Dartford in a hotel. If I was not to get and go to the gym in the morning, that would be breaking a habit. Subconsciously, when you develop a habit, you don't even think about it. And this is what a lot of people fail to understand is I run and I don't even think about it. It's habit. It's normal. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger says, somebody said, oh, why do you go to the gym? And he said, why do you have breakfast? Yeah. It's his life. When something becomes a habit, you don't think about it. And it's easy to develop a habit. It's just repetition. Making good choices, being disciplined, and getting up and doing the stuff. If it's reading a book or going for a walk, if you want that to become a habit, you have to keep doing it. As far as my training goes, I'll go completely off feel. I've gone against the curve with people's training plans of smashing yourself, running hard all the time. Doesn't work for me. 1, I lose interest. 2, I get injured. 3, it steppers my results. So I found my own way whereby as long as I'm consistent, it's habitual, I'm out running every single day. As long as it's easy, I'll do 1 hard session a week. I'm content. That is the bottom line. If you want to start running, you have to make it a habit. But what a lot of people do is they go too hard. Ego will set in, and you get this constant battle with yourself where you're trying to beat yesterday's run or beat last week's park run, and you're in a constant state of fatigue. So there's no room for progression. So understanding easy running is imperative to going out there and starting running. So for anybody that is an outsider to running and wants to become a better runner, first, knowledge is power. If you know what easy running is, then you will be a better runner. Trainers, I go through 1 pair of trainers a month. I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't gamble. So my crutch is running trainers. But it doesn't have to be that way. Like if you don't run that much. But in regards to hiked up trainers, I have got 1 or 2 pairs, but my daily trainers I pay £48 for with a discount. So they're not overly expensive. Somebody would spend more than 48 quid on coffee a month, I'm sure. Other things for training, yeah, it don't really matter about weather with regards to if it's a habit, you're going to do it anyway. Mileage, it fluctuates. Usually when I'm not, I've got a little bit of an injury now. When I'm carrying an injury, I'll play it as and when. But ordinarily, I like to be at least 50 miles a week. And then if I'm training for a peak race, it'd be like 75 or 80. But at the moment, I'm on like 30 or 40 miles a week because of I got a little bit of a hamstring issue. But yeah, that's the mileage. But yeah, in general terms, I train on my own. I train my own way, and it works for me. I've run a sub 3 hour marathon. I've won races. I've set course records. So whilst other people might look at me and go, "Oh, that's not the way you should be training. You should be doing 3 speed sessions a week." What did I say earlier in the podcast? Dare to be different. If you want different results from everybody else, you've got to do fucking something different. And if you keep doing the same things, you're not progressing, then you've got to mix it up.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, there's a lot of lessons in there that we could go off in different tangents, but there's some really, really rock solid advice in there. Again, thank you for sharing it. Like I said earlier, it's why I do these.
Yeah.
That wisdom across. So moving into the last couple of things, for time and people's attention spans, and I've got to be off about 7:45 and everything. So
yeah, so
just aiming for that roughly. It's cool. I'm well happy with what we've talked about so far. What was the other thing I was going to say? Oh yeah, with training, you mentioned injuries there as well. One small thing to highlight. Well, it's a small thing that could be a big thing if it's not done right. Avoiding wear and tear on your body, running the right way and everything, wear and tear on it, and anything from pulling muscles and warming up the right way to the knees. A lot of people talk about that. Just these little things that people might not know. Because a big thing you said there is about basically being in tune with yourself and doing it your way, not doing it a rigid way that it's like, oh, you've got to do this regardless of how it feels. Being in tune with your body, being in tune with your mind. I love the habit thing as well, by the way, because that is something just to highlight that. Really powerful, because I remember coming across this, that anybody's always going to be we all have habits. It's just whether they're good habits or bad habits. You're always going to be a slave to habits. It's just it is what you do every day take you towards something you want or away from it, but you're always going to have habits. It's just whether they're so that's a really powerful lesson. But going back to the injury thing, how do you avoid injuries most of the time competing at or performing even when you're training at such a high level consistently for so long, if that makes sense?
again, it's the expectations of yourself. So when you look at somebody else's training, you can't compare your middle with their end, right? So, and that's where a lot of people fall foul is, let's say you started running and you saw my progression, or Strava is another fucking pet hate of mine. You saw my Strava, you saw my paces, and you then feel, just this is just a broad, I'm not saying you in particular, but you then feel slightly inferior and think, oh, I need to up my paces. Then you're not training you, you're training what you think my perception is of you. So by doing that, you're higher in your risk of injury because you're not prepared for that training that I'm doing. So never ever compare your middle with my end. So my key advice would be focus on you. The way that I get out of, the only reason I'm injured now is because I'm doing something that you shouldn't really do. I'm doing 6 ultramarathons in 6 months, and that's not, normally I'd race twice or 3 times a year, and I've raced 4 times in 4 weeks. But I'm raising money for charity. But ordinarily, when you're training, you should know if you're running too hard or too easy. Because when you're training, let's say my week consists of 80 miles. I do an 80-mile week, let's say. 8 of those would be hard. 72 would be easy. And that is how I get away with any injury. Because my ratio to hard versus easy is at the right level for me. For you, it could be 95 and 5. But it's dropping your expectations, like a park run. Don't get me wrong, and I'm going to get you. We'll get some comments in here now for fucking park run. All the park runners will come out and slay me for this. Park run's a great initiative. I fucking love it. Right? It gets people active. There's thousands of people in the UK that come to park run every single week. What goes wrong is people try and beat their times every single week. Every single week, people will be like, oh, chasing the PB, trying to get a faster time. Ultimately, by doing that, guaranteed, they would have gone hard in the week as well. Harder on the easier runs, hard on the hard run. When they come to park run, their fatigue level is so high, and that's where injuries happen. So park run, whilst it is a great initiative, run it once a month hard. The rest want to be specific sessions. So it's really focusing. And if you don't understand about running, get yourself a coach. The way I have found not to get injured is through 15 years of running experience and knowing what works for my body and knowing what don't. But the general scope of things is slow things down. It's never the pace that kills you. It's never the distance. It's always the pace. Yeah. Like you could run for 100 miles. Anybody, I'm telling you now, anybody could run for 100 miles. It won't be the distance that kills you. It's the pace. If you do it too fast, you're fucked.
Well, that, in my mind, that feeds back a lot to what you were saying earlier about, you versus you and the authenticity and everything like that, not doing it someone else's way, doing it your way. But yeah, avoiding the whole burnout thing is a powerful thing, and it's a powerful thing in our era as well. Again, because you mentioned about a lot earlier, you mentioned about Instagram reels and motivation and stuff. And the thing is, there's a lot of that now in there that you should work 24/7, and you should always be grinding, and you should always be, and of course, it's very important to rest and look after yourself and pace yourself and everything as well. Just be in the flow. Our bodies are not built for 24/7 grinding, as you'll know all too well, better than I will even. So it's a very important lesson. So last topic, and then I'm going to have to jump off. Sorry about that, because I usually like to chat with people at the end.
Yeah, it's fine.
But it's one of those. But your future plans. I mean, obviously, you mentioned about the fact that you're packing these races in, back to back, I suppose, in running terms, I guess, or whatever. So that's something you're working on. But in terms of like where you'd like to go from here, this could lead to some interesting places, because obviously you're the type of person who consistently wants to improve and push the limits, obviously. So yeah, I mean, what's
Yeah,
like the final?
the message is simple, Lee. Whilst I'm doing running for me, and running is my life, my future plans are to use running for the better of other people. So the way I plan on doing that is, having gone through therapy myself, having been in the darkest place myself, I know there's a way out. And whilst it may not seem it for those that are there in that current time, it fucking is. So my whole plan in running now is to escalate a profile, not for me, for my message. So I'm going to be planning on running a marathon in every city in the UK. That's just not it's not a short goal, it's a long-term goal. But who know, I'm not 100% sure in regards to what comes next with the racing. But what I do want, I'm going to be raising money for a Big Moose, which is a mental health charity, which provide free therapy sessions. They started Project Million. They hit it yesterday, so they've hit £1 million raised. So my whole purpose alongside my running now is to highlight the fact to people that therapy changes people's lives. You can change your life no matter what situation you're in. And to do that, I want to grow a platform where I'm speaking to more people. And I've got friends that are life coaches and go around and do school talks and stuff like that. So I think that's going to be the route I go down, right? Whilst I'm working full time, I think from my experience with my brain condition and the military and changing my life and that kind of stuff, I think that if I can add valuable lessons to these youngsters early, then that is what my mission is going to be. I want a bigger platform so I can speak to more people and get more people in out of their fucking darkest places.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I'm all for it. I mean, you know, there's the old saying, what we do for ourselves dies with us, what we do for others lives on forever, or something like that. But in other words, have an impact on people, a positive impact is one of the most powerful things, probably the most powerful thing that we can aim for in life, you know, because we're transcending just ourselves and our own identity, and we're touching other people's lives. You know, it's what I try and do with these interviews, and that work you're doing is absolutely amazing. So keep it up. If people want to reach out to you to help with any of this type of stuff, anything that you're doing in the future, or even if they just want some advice, if people are in a dark place, obviously we put the message out with this video, but in terms of if they want to contact you to know more, what should they do? What's the best way to do that?
So I'm active on social media. So on Instagram, it's Lee Runs Ultras. But if you want to reach out to me in regards to running, then I've got a website. It's pursuepurpose.co.uk. Just drop me a message in there with your intentions, your goals. I'm not charging. I don't charge because, like I said to you, right, running is my life, it's my passion. And if I can help other people, I will. And whilst I might not be as experienced as some of the other run coaches, I do have 15 years experience in personal training, boxing coach. So running is, I offer free running plans and running advice. And I've even got an ebook that I've wrote that's free. So nothing for me is for a monetary gain. I'm doing this to better people's lives. So yeah, Lee Runs Ultras or pursuepurpose.co.uk.
Incredible. Well, you heard it first, everybody. That's where to contact Lee. But what I'll say, mate, is first of all, thank you so much for your time. That's the first thing, because obviously, we've talked for ages. It's gone by in a flash. It hasn't felt like a long time at all, from my
Yeah.
side at least. And even then, I know there's more topics we could have gone into, but we've packed in a lot. Oh, shout out to Damien as well, DT Boxing as well. Give him a quick mention. I did say
Yes.
we would. Shout out to Damien, top man, your cousin, as well. But yeah, I mean, in terms of that, first of all, thank you for your time, and also thank you for being an open book, because we've talked about like things that are quite personal here, obviously with the military, with your health, with the highs and lows you've been through, etc. No matter how many interviews I do, I got massive respect for that, because it takes balls to, speak about your life, and people listen to it and everything. So that's the first thing. I know it's the least of your worries with the things you've been through in your life, but at the same time, I've still got respect for it. So no,
Yeah, yeah.
so there's that. And also I really mean this when I say it, but this is one of the best interviews I've done. And I've done a lot. I've done over 200 of these, but it's one of the
Yeah.
best I've ever done. And I don't say that lightly, because um, obviously your story is amazing. What you've overcome, what you represent as a human being, just
Yeah.
by doing what you do, it's incredible. But the way we've underpinned this with the life lessons and everything, and it give back. And I hope that, by people listening to this, that will change their trajectory, that'll change some of their habits, that'll change their mental health, and go and steer it in this way, steer it over here in a positive direction. Because it's hard to do when you're on a certain trajectory, like you said right at the beginning about you're basically going to end up in jail or on drugs or whatever if you didn't change something. It's hard to do because it's a lot of weight moving in that direction, but it's possible to do, obviously, as we've established. And I hope that by listening to this, people will pick up some tips on how to do that and how to be the best version of themselves they can be. Not to be necessarily like you, even if they're
Yeah.
but to be the best version of themselves that they can be.
Exactly. They have to be different.
Yeah, that's the most powerful thing. So thank you so much. I usually have a chat with people at the end. I'm going to have to jump off just for my next call with this guy who's like a judo champion and everything, and then I'm
Sorted.
gonna have some dinner because I do them back.
We'll catch up in a week anyway, Lee.
Yeah, it'd be great to chat on the phone, FaceTime,
Yeah.
whatever, and just have a chat about things anyway, because I feel we're on the same page about a lot of stuff. And there's a lot of things, as we've been talking, I've been tempted to go off into that topic.
Yeah, well, I've watched your podcast now. Obviously, I've got you on Facebook and stuff, so I know we're on the same wavelength with the mental aspect of things. So yeah, we'll definitely catch up in the week or the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, whenever you're ready, you let me know. I'll send you my number as well after this, and and you can reach me there as well, and we'll go. But yeah, you have a great evening, mate. Look after yourself. Best wishes to your family, and thank you again for everything. I'm absolutely blown away. Thank you.
Cheers, thanks, Lee. Speak soon, buddy.
Speak soon. Take it easy.
Take care.
Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.